Hi, this is Dr. Perry Carpenter. I'd like to thank you for taking the time to join me on today's discussion. In today's discussion, we're in our sixth and final session of our ongoing series entitled The New Era Qualified Medical Evaluator. And I have some fabulous ideas to share with you which will help you streamline and expedite the production of your final product, which is your QME report. And this is never more important than it is now, following some recent findings that are causing dramatic changes in the Qualified Medical Evaluators program as we've known it to be over the recent years and even decades. And before we get into the discussion of today's topics, let's just briefly talk about where we've come from so far in this program. And let's talk about what are the primary drivers of this new wave of change that is overcoming us like a tsunami wave at the beach. Okay? And I think if I can explain a couple of these research findings to you, you can better understand why the impetus is upon us now more than ever before to dramatically change our standard operating procedure and the methods that we use in going about producing our face-to-face evaluations and in producing our final finished product, which is our QME report. Okay? So the research studies upon which this entire 6-hour continuing education home study program are based include 3 studies. The first and probably the most important driver of these new changes has to do with the State Auditor's Report, which was published in November 2019. And the findings of the State Auditor's Report are supplemented by some findings from the California Workers' Compensation Institute in their study of February 2018, which describes some of the changing trends in the QME population and in regional differences as to how qualified medical evaluations are scheduled and are conducted throughout the state of California. And then there was a Commission on Health and Safety and Workers' Compensation report in 2017, which contributed to the body of knowledge about some trends and some changes taking place in the QME population and in the economy of the medical legal program in general. Now, in today's program, we're going to focus primarily on the State Auditor's Report, because it seems that the State Auditor's Report carries heavy weight and heavy influence down at the Division of Workers' Compensation. Now, I'm not in politics and I'm not a lawyer, but it seems that based upon the pace at which changes are occurring, it seems that the State Auditor has great authority over the Division of Workers' Compensation, and it seems that the Division of Workers' Compensation is now compelled by the Office of the State Auditor to shore up some deficiencies that were identified in the State Auditor's Report. So we began this session in this series. We began by talking about how these new changes, and we'll elaborate again on some of the findings of the State Auditor's Report and some of the changes that are transpiring as a result of those findings. We'll talk about more of those in a minute. But because of those changes, we talked about how a new opportunity is presenting itself to the qualified medical evaluator who dares to persist through these changes. The qualified medical evaluator who has some stick-to-itiveness, who has some perseverance, and who has the capacity to both adapt and adopt him or herself to these new changes, there's going to be a great new opportunity as a flood of new cases become available to the remaining qualified medical evaluators in the system. Because as you well know by now, over the last couple of years at least, we've lost many qualified medical evaluators, and the reasons for that are complex and varied, but the point is that we've lost many qualified medical evaluators, and we stand to lose even more qualified medical evaluators who, as a result of the new changes now upon us, they simply decide that this is not the work for them, and the profitability that they hoped evaluating injured workers would present to them just is not there as they had originally anticipated. So a great new opportunity is upon the qualified medical evaluator who's flexible, okay? Well, for those qualified medical evaluators who plan on sticking it out and sticking it through the new changes, it's going to be increasingly important that you become skilled and talented and fluent in a new language. And the new language has to deal with substantial medical evidence. Now, I know that you've heard this term, substantial medical evidence, and I know that you're familiar with the concepts of substantial medical evidence, but being familiar with the concept and actually being adept and being able to incorporate substantial medical evidence into your opinions and conclusions are two entirely different skill sets. Well, now more than ever before, it's imperative that you as a qualified medical evaluator learn the simple skill. Once you grasp this skill, it's actually a simple skill once you grasp it. It's a simple skill of qualifying all of your opinions and conclusions in the body of your report as substantial medical evidence. Now, I want to just say a couple words about substantial medical evidence to help you understand the importance of this in the way that judges use our reports and the opinions and conclusions in our reports to resolve disputed issues in these workers' compensation cases. Okay? So it's known at the court level that the court can resolve disputed issues only when it's presented with evidence that reaches a certain standard. The evidence has to be of a certain quality. It has to meet a certain threshold to be the type of evidence that by law the court can rely on. And that standard, that threshold, is what's referred to as substantial medical evidence. So as an analogy to help illustrate what substantial medical evidence is as that relates to your opinions and conclusions, I want to ask you if you remember that children's toy from many decades ago, probably when you were a child. I know when I was a child I had one. And it was the Mr. Potato Head toy. Do you remember the Mr. Potato Head toy where you were given this lumpy round potato? And then the potato had all of these various facial and head features such as ears and nose and lips and several different combinations of each of these varied body parts that you could dress up the potato and make it an actual potato head, okay? So that was the children's toy several decades ago. Well, the potato, the potato represents your opinion, okay? Your opinion is the potato. And when the potato gets in front of the judge is going to look at the potato. And if the potato is just a plain potato, just a plain opinion, the judge cannot use a plain potato opinion. But if the judge looks at your potato and sees that you've dressed up the potato with eyelashes, with 2 ears, with lips, with eyes, with a necktie, with hair. In other words, if the potato is dressed up, then the potato becomes a substantial potato. And your opinion, when it's dressed up, can become a substantial opinion. So your opinion, like the potato, must be dressed up. The judge cannot simply use the opinion unless the opinion is sufficiently dressed up so that it qualifies as a substantial opinion. So to dress up your opinions, you have to base your opinion on relevant facts. That's like putting the lips on the potato. You add the relevant facts that support the opinion. the opinion must be based on an adequate examination. So your adequate examination is like adding the eyes to the potato head. So in your opinion, you refer back to findings in your physical examination that support your opinion and dress up your opinion with support. Your opinion must be dressed up with how and why reasoning in support of your opinion. And when your opinion can be dressed up sufficiently, it can rise to the level of a substantial opinion, and it can then be used by the courts to resolve difficult issues. One of the current complaints of the state auditor is that qualified medical evaluators' reports do not resolve disputed issues when these reports come in front of the judge at a hearing. And the reason that the reports do not resolve the issues is because the opinions and conclusions contained in the reports don't rise to this high level, this lofty standard of substantial opinions. And the judge simply cannot use the opinions. And this causes a great delay and much trouble, which we'll touch upon here as we go in this program. So it's going to become of paramount importance that you learn this new language and that you incorporate substantial medical evidence into every single opinion and conclusion within the body of your report. In session 4, we talked about how to reinvent yourself as a QME so that you can adapt to the new changes that are coming upon us, both in terms of the types of reports that are going to be required of us, and number 2, in terms of the amount that we can expect to be reimbursed for the difficult and painstaking work that we do. So let's pick up where we left off on our last session and continue to explore how to reinvent yourself as a QME. So just very briefly, in session 4, we talked about reinventing yourself as a qualified medical evaluator. And we talked about how the system tends to treat the conservative QMEs compared to how the system tends to treat qualified medical evaluators who tend to be on the more liberal side of the bell-shaped curve. And it seems that according to the research studies from both the California Workers' Compensation Institute and the Commission on Health and Safety in Workers' Compensation, that conservative QMEs tend to be rewarded by the system. They tend to be the qualified medical evaluators that get the most cases, that are most often selected as the last man standing off of panels, whereas liberal QMEs tend to be qualified medical evaluators who are more frequently disciplined and punished by the system. The liberal qualified medical evaluators tend to draw scrutiny to themselves and to their reporting, and they tend to, more than conservative QMEs as a group, they tend to be the qualified medical evaluators that are brought up on restriction and or suspension of their QME credential. Now, positioning yourself as a conservative versus a liberal QME involves your medical decision making. This is as relates to your medical decision making on AOE-COE, on permanent impairment, and on apportionment. And I'm going to have some suggestions for you as to how you can improve your medical decision making so that you can arrive at truthful and accurate opinions and conclusions very quickly, which is going to become essential in the new era because of changes in the medical legal fee schedule. Changes in the medical legal fee schedule are now not allowing qualified medical evaluators to deliberate and ponder forever the opinions and conclusions of their reports. Now, in the new era, the medical legal fee schedule is moving towards a flat and fixed fee structure, not based on time. See, in the current medical legal fee schedule, we have several time-based billing codes, the ML101, the ML104, and the ML105, and even the ML106 are all time-based billing codes. Well, time-based billing codes are going the way of the dinosaur, and new new medical legal fee schedule coding and billing is going to involve flat rates for the work that we do. Thus, we no longer have time to spend incessantly on deliberating over our opinions and conclusions. Now, we have to get to our opinions and conclusions quickly within the time frame that's allocated for by the reimbursement rate that is being prescribed now down at the Division of Workers' Compensation. So these changes create the new paradigm for the qualified medical evaluation, wherein it is now essential that we be able to quickly and accurately get through these evaluations with truthful and accurate opinions and conclusions, with emphasis on the word quickly. Quickly. It now has to be done accurately, quickly. Has to be done quickly. So actually producing quality reports in a finite and limited period of time is going to require that the qualified medical evaluator adopt a new series of systems from start to finish in the evaluation. And in session 5, we began our discussion of some of those such systems. So in session 5, we began talking about some of those systems that will allow you to quickly, efficiently, and profitably produce your qualified medical evaluation report. And we began by talking about some new systems and some new ideas for handling the intake and scheduling of your appointment when it first comes in, either by telephone, by fax machine, or by email. And the principle of the system that I shared with you is to let others do the heavy lifting work for you in terms of getting that appointment confirmed, getting that appointment authorized, and getting that appointment established as a bona fide, compensable appointment for you as the qualified medical evaluator. And as we said in that discussion, not all phone calls and not all faxes that request an appointment from you are actual appointments. They have to go through a confirmation procedure where you get a head nod and a green light and a thumbs up from the payer of the evaluation, which is the claims administrator. And many times we get faxes and calls from the applicant attorney suggesting perhaps that you are the last man or last woman standing, when in all actuality, by speaking to the other parties involved, such as the claims administrator or such as the defense attorney, you can learn that the scratch or strike process has not been completed satisfactorily or to the satisfaction of all the parties. And so we never begin the administrative process of setting up a qualified medical evaluation appointment until the appointment is fully authorized as a compensable appointment. And in this way, we don't waste time, we don't waste energy, we don't waste effort, and we don't drain our enthusiasm by setting up appointments and getting our hopes up for appointments that aren't bona fide, verified appointments. And the secret to this system is to let others do the work for you by using electronic files, by using photos, by using text messages to gather the necessary information before you spend even a single minute administratively wasting time on appointments that haven't gone through the proper procedure. We then talked about some systems for quickly and efficiently handling the review of records, because under the new paradigm and in the new era, review of records is no longer going to be a complexity factor, reimbursable based on time as it currently is. So in the new era and in the new paradigm, we have to quickly and efficiently provide the parties with a review of records to demonstrate that we did consider all of the medical and non-medical information that was presented to us. But in the new era, we want to limit our extensive presentation within the body of our report to simply focus on the information that we rely upon for the formulation of our opinions and conclusions later on in the report. Now, the review of records will always be a hard-working section of our report, and qualified medical evaluators who value and who use the review of records later on in their report to form the basis for their opinions and conclusions. So the review of records is that section of your report wherein you show the parties your hand, you show them your cards, you show them the information upon which later in the body of your report you base your opinions and conclusions. So this will always be the case with the review of records. And so in the new era, you can simply limit your review or your discussion of the records within the body of your report to the information upon which you rely. Okay, it doesn't make sense to spend great time presenting the parties in the body of your report with information from the medical records that's not relevant to your opinions and conclusions later on in your report. So in this way, you can think of your review of records as becoming increasingly streamlined in the future, increasingly streamlined and a more condensed section within the body of your report. Finally, in session number 5, we talked about the critical importance of confirmations in getting each of the parties on the same page, on the same day, at the same time, at the same location for your qualified medical evaluation appointment. So if any one of the parties involved with the evaluation, such as the owner of the satellite office location, such as the examinee, such as the interpreter, such as you as the doctor, if any one of you are not synchronized and on the same page as to the day, date, time of the appointment can easily be foiled, F-O-I-L-E-D, foiled, and aborted. And guess who suffers the loss of a foiled appointment? Yes, it's you as the qualified medical evaluator. And I'm speaking to you from firsthand experience. And my own experience is that when I, as the qualified medical evaluator, the person who ultimately is going to get paid for this evaluation, when I drop out even a single detail, fail to confirm, a single party failed to handle one minute piece of requirement for the evaluation, when I neglect to do that, either due to neglect or oversight or forgetfulness or whatever, it always comes back to haunt me. And I'm telling you, if you don't establish iron fist control over every single aspect of the evaluation, you will suffer financial loss due to repetition and duplication and trying to get the evaluation restarted again, thereby doubling your overhead, doubling your time, doubling your cost. And any profit that was left in the evaluation under the new medical legal fee schedule will easily be sucked up and sapped out of the evaluation, leaving you barely with enough left in the case to cover your costs of the evaluation. So confirmation procedures are more important now than ever before. Okay? So let's pick up where we left off there and continue now in session 6 with a couple of more systems that you can employ in the face-to-face evaluation with your examinee, and then also a couple of systems that you can employ in quickly and accurately arriving at opinions and conclusions within the body of your report that qualify as substantial medical evidence. Okay, so let's begin. Okay, so let's talk about some systems that you can employ in the face-to-face evaluation, which will allow you to get the important data quickly, in such a way that you can have the necessary data, necessary information, and necessary findings that later on, when you get back in front of your computer and begin to work on the physical body of the QME report, you'll have the necessary data so that you can provide opinions and conclusions that are substantial medical evidence, and you can do it in such a way that's quick and efficient and profitable. So the first thing I want to talk to you about has to do with your preparation for the evaluation. And I'm sure most of you out there in QME land operate this way, but I know that there's a small fraction of qualified medical evaluators who believe that it's not proper or not necessary or not even a good idea to spend much time in advance of the face-to-face evaluation in preparing for the evaluation. And in explaining this philosophy, some qualified medical evaluators will explain that if the examinee fails to show, then the time that was spent in preparation would have been lost and would have been in vain. And to this philosophy, I completely disagree. In my opinion, you must prepare exhaustively in advance of the qualified medical evaluation, in advance of the face-to-face evaluation, in expectation that the examinee will show. In other words, you put out a positive message by your preparation. You put out a positive message to the universe that you expect the examinee to show. And then if you go about the proper procedures, the proper confirmatory procedures, you can ensure that the examinee will show to the appointment. And when the examinee does show to the appointment, you're fully prepped and ready to go and scripted in your approach to the face-to-face evaluation, rather than simply taking the face-to-face evaluation as it comes and doing the evaluation by the seat of the pants and taking it as it comes and seeing what unfolds, and all these metaphors that unprepared qualified medical evaluators use to justify their lack of preparation in advance of the face-to-face evaluation. So when you get to the face-to-face evaluation, of course, all of your materials should be fully prepped. All of your instruments should be laid out and organized. All of your documents, such as your required forms, your required symptom questionnaires, your disclosure requirements form, your physical examination template form, everything is all prepared, everything is all laid out in its order of usage based upon the sequence of events of the evaluation. All of your instruments are laid out in the sequence in which you use them during the evaluation. And you as the qualified medical evaluator are prepared to zip right through this evaluation from start to finish in a scripted and formatted manner. Okay? No seat of the pants, no off the cuff, no spontaneous types of systems. This is all a scripted system in advance that you can expedite and can get through quickly, and will allow you to get the information that you need so that you can properly prepare your report. For those examinations that involve an interpreter, the interpreter is a free for you as the qualified medical evaluator, is a free secretary available for your use during the face-to-face evaluation. So during the physical examination, when your examination procedures require the obtaining of a measurement, of an angle, of a circumference, of any objective measurement, you can use the interpreter to help you fill out your physical examination template by simply calling out the findings of your examination maneuvers and procedures to the interpreter. And you can train the interpreter as to how to fill those in within the body of your physical examination template. And this saves you as the qualified medical evaluator valuable time from going back and forth between the examinee and your template to fill in the data on your template. So think of various creative ways that you can use the interpreter to help expedite the evaluation. And then finally, the next system I want to talk to you about is of critical importance. And it has to do with the relative importance of activities of daily living findings compared to physical examination findings. So what do we mean by that? Well, qualified medical evaluators, we know that examinees qualify for permanent impairments when they suffer a loss or a functional loss or a loss of use of a body part, but only when that loss compromises or causes a limitation in their activities of daily living. So let me just read a couple of passages for you from the AMA guides to elaborate on this principle. And I have my AMA guides here. Let's show that to you. There's the guides, 5th edition. Okay. On page 2 of the guides, they tell us that an impairment may lead to functional limitations or the inability to perform activities of daily living. It says an impairment may lead. So therefore, there must be some impairments that do not lead to functional limitations or the inability to perform activities of daily living. So, based on this quote from the AMA guides, according to the guides, not all impairments lead to functional limitations or inability to perform activities of daily living. Okay, so an examinee can have an impairment, but if the impairment does not have a functional limitation or does not cause the inability to perform activities of daily living, that does not qualify for a permanent impairment rating. Okay? So not all impairments qualify for permanent impairment ratings. Only impairments that lead to functional limitations or the inability to perform activities of daily living qualify for an impairment rating. Okay? So in that sense, which is more important in your evaluation? The physical examination that identifies the impairment, or the activities of daily living assessment, which determines whether or not the impairment causes functional limitations or causes the inability to perform activities of daily living? Okay, which is more important? Well, on page 5, the guides go on to tell us that a 0% whole person impairment rating, 0%, is assigned to an individual with an impairment. He has an impairment. He or she has an impairment. If the impairment has no significant organ or body system functional consequences and does not limit the performance of the common activities of daily living indicated in table 1.2. So according to the guides, the activities of daily living assessment is at least as important in the physical examination in determining if your examinee qualifies for a permanent impairment rating. See, examinees who have an impairment, which you would identify on your physical examination, they have an impairment, they only qualify for an impairment rating when that impairment causes criteria B, which is some limitation in the performance of activities of daily living. Now, most qualified medical evaluators emphasize the physical examination findings over their findings on the activities of daily living assessment. And according to the AMA guides, perhaps the activities of daily living assessment should carry even greater weight than the physical examination findings, because an examinee can have physical examination findings consistent with an impairment, but if that impairment causes no functional limitations and no limitations in activities of daily living, then no permanent impairment rating is assigned. So for our purposes, the activities of daily living assessment is at least as, if not more important, than the physical examination findings. So the suggestion that I have for you related to this system is, number one, with regards to your physical examination, you need to begin to start to limit your physical examination of the examinee to involve an examination only for the presence or the absence of impairments. for the presence or absence of impairments. Now, each region of the body has associated impairments that are described in the AMA guides. And many of the conditions that we assess for in our physical examination, such as the physical examination we would use in our clinical practice, are not impairments. So we need to know what are the impairments in the AMA guides that are described in the AMA guides. We need to know the impairments and limit our physical examination solely to those impairments. So for example, in the shoulder, impairments of the shoulder involve, number one, a resection of the distal clavicle, number two, loss of range of motion of the shoulder, number three, loss of strength of the shoulder, and number four, instability of the shoulder. Those are the four impairments of the shoulder. Now, in our clinical practice, when a patient comes in for treatment of a shoulder problem, we do a physical examination on the shoulder to assess for many, many conditions of the shoulder. We assess for impingement syndromes, rotator cuff strains, bicep tendon strains, acromioclavicular sprains, and all these conditions in and around the shoulder complex, not all of which are impairments. There is no impairment described in the AMA guides for shoulder impingement syndrome. There are no impairments described in the guides for bicep tendonitis. Those are conditions that we evaluate for in our clinical practice, but in our QME practice, we want to limit our physical examination to assess for the presence or the absence of impairments. See, the name of this book is the guidelines, the AMA guidelines to the evaluation of permanent impairment. AMA guides to the evaluation of permanent impairment. We're in the permanent impairment evaluation to assess for permanent impairments. So we're going to limit our physical examination to help us determine the presence or the absence of impairments. The impairment is either there or it's not there. In addition, we're going to ramp up as much as we ramp down our physical examination and discard unnecessary procedures from our physical examination. We're going to ramp up our activities of daily living assessment in the face-to-face interview in order to arrive at accurate, true limitations, if any, if the examinee actually has any, true limitations to activities of daily living, such that our activities of daily living assessment will support our physical examination findings as to the presence or absence of impairments, so that the two can be used very quickly to arrive at a determination as to whether or not the examinee qualifies for permanent impairment or whether the examinee does not qualify for permanent impairment. So in that sense, and with this as our philosophy, the activities of daily living assessment is at least as important as your findings on physical examination, and I'm suggesting that you adjust both of these procedures in your face-to-face evaluation to limit the physical examination, but to expand the activities of daily living assessment so that you can quickly and accurately arrive at your opinions and conclusions on permanent impairment. Okay? Well, what about some systems for some other difficult decision-making choke points experienced by qualified medical evaluators? Let's talk about one more of those right now. Okay, so let's talk about some systems that you can use when you arrive at those difficult medical decision-making crossroads, especially as relates to the difficult determinations related to AOE-COE. This would be those evaluations that you obtain under Labor Code 4060 for the compensability evaluation. Number two, the extent or the presence and the extent of permanent impairment. Talk about how you can quickly arrive at your opinions and conclusions there. And then finally, on perhaps what seems to be the most difficult determination that's required of qualified medical evaluators, and that is the apportionment approximate percentages. And if you're anything like me, you'll agree and you'll admit that the apportionment determination can be extremely difficult, and qualified medical evaluators gnash and grind their teeth in coming up with their apportionment approximate percentages, but it's actually not that difficult if you rely on a simple system. So first of all, with AOE and COE, it's going to be more important now than ever that we quickly, expeditiously, and efficiently arrive at our AOE, COE determination. And that can only be done by establishing a system based upon the presence or the absence of red flags. Now, many times arriving at an opinion on AOE, COE is very, very difficult. And qualified medical evaluators always want to make the correct and accurate decision, because so many parties are relying upon a correct decision by the qualified medical evaluator. So in establishing a system for arriving at your AOE, COE determination, it pays to take time to pay attention for the presence of any red flags for industrial injury. And it's important that you become familiar with some of the red flags that raise suspicion for the presence or the absence of an industrial injury. And when you spot red flags that are known inconsistencies with an industrial injury, this is something that will allow you to very quickly, without deliberating forever and ever over this important decision, this will allow you to quickly arrive at a decision either for or against industrial injury. So if you're not familiar with some of the red flags associated with workers' compensation claims, I want to share with you a document from the Zenith Insurance Company. And this is called Red Flags of Workers' Compensation Fraud and Abuse. And I'll just share a couple with you, a couple of the common red flags. So with relation to the employee or your examinee, if the injured employee claims injuries that are inconsistent with the facts about the accident, that would be considered a red flag. If the injured employee stays out of work longer than the doctor prescribed and shows difficulty or reluctance in going back to work, that would be a red flag. If the employee has a prior history of suspicious claims involving subjective injuries, that would be a red flag. If the injured employee is retiring, is on probation, is involved in a labor dispute, is disgruntled, meaning the employee has a high level of job dissatisfaction, if the employee is a poor job performer, or if the employee is subject to a disciplinary action, these are all suspicious red flags for the presence of an industrial injury. And I can tell you that I recently had a case myself wherein the examinee claimed industrial injury 6 months, almost to the day, 6 months prior to his projected date of retirement. And coincidentally, this particular examinee had exactly 6 months of paid sick time available in his bank, in his benefit bank, through his employer. So through claiming an industrial injury 6 months prior to his scheduled retirement date, he was able to capture the entirety of his 6 months of paid sick pay. Otherwise, those 6 months of paid sick pay would have dissipated up into the ethers and would have been lost to him forever had he not had opportunity to use those sick days. So this is among the many red flags for workers' compensation claims. Additionally, if the accident or illness, now if we're talking now about the accident or illness, if the accident or illness lacks witnesses This is a major red flag, and this is one of the primary red flags that you should focus on with each and every AOE, COE determination. Was there a witness? Was there any witnesses? Okay? Number 2, if the accident or illness occurs late on a Friday afternoon, this is typical, occurs late on a Friday afternoon or early on a Monday morning, and especially those cases that occur on a Friday and are not reported until 2 days later on a Monday morning. So this is what's referred to as a delay in reporting. So 2 primary red flags related to the accident or illness is an unwitnessed incident with a delay in reporting. So in these cases, when you identify these red flags of an unwitnessed incident with a delay in reporting, then you can always ask yourself, how would a reasonable person behave in the context of a bona fide industrial injury? In the context of a bona fide industrial injury, most reasonable persons would report the injury, especially because employees are constantly going through safety training and workshops at work where they are admonished and encouraged to report any injury, even a scrape, even a cut, even a bruise, even a bump. They're admonished to report any injury, and most reasonable persons suffering a bona fide industrial injury will report the injury reasonably proximate to the date of the occurrence of the injury. So when you spot red flags, you can quickly and accurately arrive at your opinions and conclusions on AOE COE, which will 99.99% of the time be accurate. On the other hand, if the examinee presents with no red flags, then that's high likelihood that an industrial injury actually did occur, and you can opine accordingly. With regards to permanent impairment and permanent impairment ratings, as we said on our last slide, it's critical that you streamline your physical examination procedures down to examine specifically for the impairments. So again, using the shoulder as an example, in the permanent impairment evaluation, it's not necessary to examine the examinee for biceps tendinitis conditions. It's not necessary to examine for shoulder impingement syndromes. It's not necessary to examine for acromioclavicular joint separation, post-traumatic sprain injuries, because those conditions are not impairments that are described in the AMA guides. So the principle is to know the impairments and examine for them. Finally, with regards to apportionment, apportionment is extremely difficult. And thankfully, the law allows us to use approximate percentages in arriving at our apportionment determination, whether that determination be 100% 0, 90% 10, 80% 20%, some percentage of the permanent impairment that's due to the industrial injury, and some percentage of the permanent impairment that's due to other factors. It's extremely difficult, and the legislature understood this when they wrote the language of the law, allowing us to employ approximate percentages. So there's no one in the world that's going to press you on your approximate percentages, providing that you can provide some support, some substantial medical evidence in support of your apportionment approximate percentages. And how you do that is you focus on the single most important of all the facts that go into the apportionment determination. Now remember, according to Escobedo and other precedential cases that established the substantial medical evidence that's required in the apportionment determination, which was specifically Escobedo, Escobedo requires that your apportionment approximate percentages, whatever those may be, those percentages and your opinion on those percentages must be based on relevant facts. Relevant facts. Escobedo defined relevant facts as critical in establishing your opinion as substantial medical evidence. So, if that's true, if the opinion must be based on relevant facts, what are the facts most relevant in the apportionment determination? Of all the facts of the case, which facts are the most relevant in helping you arrive at your apportionment approximate percentages? Well, the most relevant of all the relevant facts have to do with the mechanism of injury. So it's the mechanism of injury that provides the most relevant and actual factual basis for you in arriving at your apportionment approximate percentages. In an examinee who, at the permanent and stationary date, is left with permanent impairment, that permanent impairment is largely due to the industrial injury and minimally due to other factors when the mechanism of injury involves a severe mechanism of injury. On the other hand, an examinee who, at the permanent and stationary date, who's left with permanent impairment, who suffered a minimal mechanism of injury or a mild mechanism of injury, or what was defined in the Escobedo case as a trivial mechanism of injury, that examinee, his permanent impairment, his or her permanent impairment, is going to be largely due to other factors, and only a small percentage is going to be due to the industrial injury in the case of a minimal mechanism of injury. So the mechanism of injury, whether that injury be mild, moderate, or severe, will largely be the most important of all the relevant facts that goes into your apportionment approximate percentages. So in order to quickly and accurately arrive at apportionment approximate percentages that are likely true for your examinee, you want to ask 100 questions about the mechanism of injury. Focus on the mechanism of injury in your history with the examinee, because it's the mechanism of injury upon which you're going to rely later in quickly arriving at your apportionment approximate percentages. So doctors, I hope this helps you. The purpose of today's presentation is to share with you some systems that you can employ in your face-to-face evaluation with the examinee that will allow you to quickly and accurately obtain the data, will allow you to obtain the necessary information regarding the mechanism of injury, will allow you to obtain the necessary data related to physical and anatomic impairments, will allow you to obtain the necessary data upon which your AOE-COE determination can be based. The purpose of these systems is to allow you to quickly and accurately get the data that you need such that when you get back to your computer to construct your final QME report, you can have the data necessary to quickly and accurately provide the opinions and conclusions in your report, and those opinions and conclusions in your report will then qualify as substantial medical evidence and will be a report upon which the parties can rely in resolving disputed issues, and will be a report that will be quickly reimbursed for you by the claims administrator. So doctors, a new era is upon us, and it's incumbent upon us now more than ever that we streamline and become increasingly more efficient and increasingly more productive in the work that we do. And I shared with you 6 sessions and 6 hours of material in this program as to exactly how to do that. So I want to thank you for taking the time to join me on this program. I look forward to being with you on future programs as well. And for now, this is Dr. Perry Carpenter, wishing you best of success in your career as a qualified medical evaluator.